in that time, Rodney started getting some gigs. They were trying to promote this new single.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically him and I. There was no band. So we were literally going out, him and I and another acoustic guitar player in a car, like promoting this single. So we went from sitting at my kitchen table with nothing like that December. They released it in January to like having a number one single out of nowhere by July. Completely other side of the universe. And, you know, I mean, we worked it. We were out there working it when nobody cared.
All right, welcome to The Path Distilled. I'm your host, Kevin Harris. My co-host is Lauren Tashman.
Hi, everybody.
And today we have Kevin Rapillo. He's the musical director and drummer for the country superstar Rodney Atkins. Thank you for joining us today, Kevin.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for coming to my attic.
Yeah, nice background. I love the background there.
Thanks.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you do and a little bit about yourself?
You know, I'm a drummer. I've been a drummer my whole life in one form or another. I moved to Nashville about 20 years ago, when rock and roll kind of died in the 90s, if you will. I was kind of looking for a gig and switching gears. Moved to Nashville and met Rodney Atkins probably 17 years ago now, before he had hits. It was just sort of a one-off thing that I did. Like many other things at that time, just playing for a lot of different people and seeing what's what. And here we are 17 years later, I'm still playing drums for him, and I've been band leader. I've been all kinds. I've tour managed. I've done everything possible for an artist that you do as you move along, as things change. And he was lucky, or not lucky. He was fortunate enough to get successful. So we just kept working. So just kept moving on. So here we are. That's the short story.
Sure.
And I'm still in Nashville. So
that's awesome. There's already a million questions coming to my mind of things I want to know about you and your story.
Good.
So I think you sent us a picture, and I'm going to pull that up. So can you tell us a little bit about why you chose this picture, and we'll go from there.
My uncle on the right, my Uncle Lou, who's my great uncle, my dad's uncle, the short story there is he's a great drummer, big band jazz drummer, his whole life. That drum kit that he's sitting behind, that's him in retirement, actually still playing, gigging all the way, you know, to the end of his life. I still have that drum kit that I'm sitting behind in that photo also. I used it last year on a session. It's an amazing drum kit from the 50s. And of course has very sentimental value, as opposed to just, you know, money value. But so he's my uncle. So my dad grew up as a little kid with my great uncle being a drummer and bringing other musicians to the house, my grandmother's house, his sister. And he played drums. He introduced me to it and some of my cousins also when we were little, and I took to it. I had no idea why. I guess it skipped a generation, and he was the coolest guy I'd ever seen. And, you know, of course I love my uncle, and he's a great guy and really funny and gregarious, as you can see by this picture. There's a lot of personality going on there, you know, and and in that era too, I was always fascinated with it. So yeah, I started as a little kid and just kept going. And luckily, because my dad grew up with him as a drummer, my dad, I don't know, understood it, but it made sense to him. Oh, okay, you can do that as long as you sort of take it seriously, or it's not, you're not going to get you a drum kit as a toy so you can throw it in the garage or something. But so that's what I was influenced by, and that's where it all started.
And what was your uncle's name?
My uncle's name was Lou Vitale. So he's a big band drummer. He played, you know, oh my gosh, he was friends with Gene Krupa. You know, I have some autographed Gene Krupa stuff on the wall back here, a famous big band drummer. And, you know, so he was just that kind of cool guy. he lived long enough to see me play in my 20s when I lived in Boston in rock bands and stuff. So that was really cool.
And you said,
yeah. So,
and you said you were 2 years old when he gave you your first set of drumsticks?
yeah, we were real little. Yeah. He just gave myself and some of my cousins, all the boy cousins, of course. Back then it's very, very, a boy thing to do, I guess. I don't think any of my cousins that were girls were very interested in it anyway, so it didn't really matter. Yeah, and I just stuck to it. We had sticks in a little wooden block rubber pad, and I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. It's hard to. I don't even know myself. Here I am, and I just loved it, and I was fascinated by it as a little kid, and then I found rock and roll not too long later. As a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, forget it. It was off to the races. So, yeah.
Were you doing anything between 2 and 7, or what happened during that time?
I'll just make him, probably, I know, making my mom crazy. As the typical story goes, you just bang on everything. It's just the sound of it, which for any kid, if I bring a friend's little kid up to my attic to look at my drums or look at drums, it's instant gratification, right? A kid can sit down and just hit something, which you're always told you're not supposed to do. You could just smash away, and it's really fun and makes noise. So I was fascinated with that right out of the gate. And then I took my first lesson, like a group lesson of kids when I was probably about 7 at the community center or something like that. I think it was the Italian community center. Weird. They'd have, all different clubs or whatever. So after school thing. And I remember being 7 and the kids were probably older, probably 12-ish. And I remember sitting on the folding chair, and I remember not being able to sort of reach my feet to the ground and still trying to hit the pad, which was too tall for me in this little group class, which you think that would have scared me away, but it didn't, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. So
was it your, it is. Was it your choice to take the lesson?
I don't think I thought of it. I think my mom probably saw it up on, however they got information back then by, by Pony Express or something, and signed me up, and I think my brother took guitar lessons or something, whatever, there was swimming, there was, just typical kid activities. And obviously the drum thing was obvious. My uncle, my dad was aware of it. So they figured I was probably interested in that. And I was, yeah. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. It's pretty cool that they did that, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
So would you consider yourself having been serious at that point, or what was it like?
Yeah, that's a good question. As far as it makes me think of, like, what could I be thinking at that age? It just seemed like it was always there. I wasn't necessarily obsessed with it like that, but it was just there. It was just, oh, this is what I do. Even at 7, that sounds so crazy, but I really just felt comfortable to me, like, oh yeah, this is, I have these things and I'm going to do this. Even at that young age, it seemed like it just made sense to me right out of the gate. I don't know why. I wasn't a prodigy or anything. I'm still not, but it seemed like it was just always there. I don't know.
Do you remember having a sense at that time of how good you were or could be?
Not really. I don't think until maybe a couple of years later, some older brothers and friends up the street had a band. They were probably high schoolers. Mm-hmm. And I could sit down at that drum kit, which I wasn't supposed to be touching, the older kids, and play it a little bit, I thought, oh, I can actually do this. When I was aware that I was that much younger than them, and they kind of looked at me funny. I do remember have that sense of that, being where I shouldn't be, but still being able to, hey, I think I can do that like that guy does it, and he's way older than me. So again, I don't think I was probably terrible, but in my head, it made sense to me, is all I can sort of on the way.
No, that's such a cool way to put it, right? It almost sounds like it felt like you found your identity even at that early age.
Yeah, it just seemed to be there. And people ask all the time, "Oh, how do you learn an instrument?" And as an adult, it's like it's like learning a new language as an adult. Very difficult,
Sure.
and it's hard. As a kid, I don't know how I learned how to do it. You don't think about it when you're a kid. You just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Practicing is not practicing when you're a kid. You're just, especially if you like it, you just do it all the time, and it seems to happen. But maybe I should have practiced more, I suppose.
Do you remember setting, like, it sounded like you were doing it mostly for fun at that point, not necessarily thinking about, I want to get to this step or this next stage, or was there some of that?
Well, I was always fascinated as a young person. I always wanted to do it. So I'd watch things on TV, or my dad would show me old movies, like old big band movies or old, 50s movies, and always fascinated with the drummer. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the guy. Love it. So I was always fascinated with it. I don't know if I put it together quite like that, but I was like, well, that's what I do too. I like it. I just want to see more of it. Not till I probably got to about, I didn't really get my first drum kit till I was, I guess, 13 years old. So I was playing on pads, but again, I don't think my dad treated it as a toy. And back then you couldn't really get, like now you can run down to Guitar Center and kind of get a really inexpensive starter kit for a kid. Then, they had some like junky toy stuff. So there was really no in between.
Mm-hmm.
So to go get a kid, an 8-year-old, a $1,200 drum kit in back then would have been insane. It just didn't make any sense. It's not even, it doesn't even matter what you do for a living. It's just crazy. So yeah, not till later, till my dad was like, oh, okay, we'll go look at a real drum kit. And we ordered my first drum kit. It was like I still have that kit, by the way. It's killer.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I got, as a preteen and teen, kids in the neighborhood, putting bands together. I had a band all through high school, rock and roll band, of course. And that's when it got nuts. That's when it really got crazy. Yeah.
So
let's dive into the crazy. Like, tell us what that was like to get your first drum set and get these bands going.
Yeah. Well, always looking at someone else's drum kit and a friend's older brother that had one in the basement. I'm like, oh my God, that's like magic to me. I just didn't have one yet. So when I got it, it was full on, get a band. And I was lucky enough to have kids in my neighborhood that we had a band almost immediately. Is great. Younger brothers of the older kids I talked about earlier that I was sort of touching their drum kit. Well, they had younger brothers that were a little older than me. So anyway, we're all friends. So yeah, that's when it really became an obsession. That's where like my band, I'm going to play every weekend in the basement. I'm going to concerts every chance I get, I grew up in Southern Connecticut. So really lucky to have every concert in the world or every group in the world come through there constantly. So my dad would take me to see stuff. I got to see, like Buddy Rich or something like that, big band stuff. And so, yeah, that's when the obsession really got crazy and I was fascinated with it. I did it all the time. I wanted to go to concerts and my parents put up with it. That's what it comes down to. They put up with it. Yeah.
And so what does practice look like for you at this point? And did you practice individually or were you always practicing with a band at this point?
I was always practicing with a band. I guess I played individually like myself, but I was never that kind of guy. There's some guys that sit down and just practice for 8 hours a day and they're amazing players. And that, I never connected it that way. It wasn't even about being lazy. I'll spend 12 hours in a room with a band, but spending 12 hours in the room by myself, that's just, I couldn't do it. But again, I'll do it all day long with a band, and not even think about it. So, what was the question?
So what did that band practice look like at that point?
Oh yeah, so it looked like playing with the band all the time. And we were gigging too, so we would go play shows. We'd learn. Of course, it was all cover tunes. We tried to write our own songs, but we're playing cover songs and playing in bars even at 15 years old, where my mom let me do that because honestly, even as a teenager, I was way more interested in getting into the bar to be able to play than to worry about drinking or something. What? No, we want to play. I want to play. I don't care about that. That's how obsessed we were. So, and I'm still the same way. Like, even to this day, I need the context. I mean, I'll work on stuff and I'll practice, and I had to do it in college or whatever, but it's still the same for me. I still want to have the context. I still want to be working on a project or recording something up here in my attic. People send me stuff and I'm working on it, trying to get it right. That to me is where I'm at with it. But yeah.
So it sounds like it's a little mix of like working on something, of having a group, to do it with, and like a real love for the performance aspect of it.
Yeah, that's I guess that's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's those combinations where, and drums especially in the instrument, playing drums by yourself to me is a little pointless, where it's not like you can sit with your guitar and play a song in the traditional way, right? Obviously. So the drums function in a band, like, this is what it's supposed to feel like. I'm functioning, that's when the drums are really, really happening to me. So that's where it still works for me. It's all about the context of that band or group or project or something. So, and live performance too. I love going out and playing. Not so much so look at me, because I'm in the back. If you asked me to stand in the front of the stage and talk or sing something, I'd think you were out of your mind. There's no way I'm doing that. But behind my drum kit, super comfortable, no problem, love it. I feel it feels right, so anyway.
So you're in high school, you're having these practices, you're getting into some bars for some gigs. What happens next in your journey?
Well, next in the journey, high school, graduating high school. So I think my big plan at 17 years old, because I live in Suffolk, Connecticut, and New York City's right down the street. Having grown up, getting to go in there occasionally and stuff, I'm thinking 17, graduate high school, move to New York City. I got it figured out. And my dad's like, wow, that's a great plan. No, that's not happening. What are you going to eat? So, but I wasn't scared. I was ready to do it. So, though I was very fortunate. It's not the time my dad ever really said that to me. He's like, hey, look, you're fortunate. I can send you to college. You need to pick one. This is kind of a one-shot deal. I was like, so being obsessed with music, I'm like, fine, I'll just go to music college then. Okay. That was a rude awakening. So I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston. Got to go to the big city, so that was cool. That sort of accomplished my goal. I'm like, it's another big city. I can find a rock band there. So I squeezed my way into Berklee, and I was in way over my head right out of the gate, buried alive. Every first 5 minutes, everybody there is better than me. And I don't mean like better than me. I mean, prodigy better than me. I'm like, wow, this is going to be interesting. What have I done? So that was it. So I ended up in college in Boston, and end up finding what I want to find, which is a like-minded people that I could start a band with and go try to get a record deal and be a rock star or whatever that means. But
prior to getting to Berklee, did you have a sense in high school with those bands of kind of, I guess, the opposite of what you experienced when you got there? Like, this feels good. I'm kind of good at this. Like, I feel like I'm doing pretty well with this.
I guess that's the problem. I never really had a sense. I was just doing it, not taking it for granted, but like, oh, this is just what I do. We're pretty good because we can get together and make it sound like something.
Yeah.
But I had no perspective. I'm a kid. I wasn't thinking I was better than anybody else. I was just thinking, oh, we're doing it. We've got it figured out. So now step 2, just go to the big city and do the same thing again.
Mm-hmm.
I thought some of my friends from high school would come with me. That was obviously because you're a kid and naive. Obviously, that's not the case. Their parents were like, no, that's a terrible idea. And they're right. But I guess my parents figured they weren't going to talk me out of it.
Mm.
It would be harder to talk me out of it at that point than to try to steer me in some direction that could possibly work out somehow. But yeah, I ended up in Boston, and yeah.
So I want to go back to that moment when you said that you felt like everybody was way better than you. Was that, you might have said this already, but you said that might be immediate, that you felt that? And
yeah, I mean, the shortest period of time from I mean, I'm joking, like 5 minutes, but it's almost literal. You know, just that environment, you know, Berklee's at that time too, and still now, but that time it was primarily a jazz school. I didn't play jazz. My uncle played jazz and big band, but I mean, that's not even my generation. You know, I like it, I love it, but I don't play it. So, you know, in that sense, I might have, you know, it's like if I went to MIT or something, I mean, or you know, what am I doing? You know, it's not what I do. So yeah, it was overwhelming, you know. But in hindsight, it's an immediate lesson in survival. You know, complete survival. Like, how are you going to survive? You're not going to be better, so you lose already. But how do you survive? So, and that's kind of, you know.
What did you do?
Tried to survive. I got in there and, you know, slowly got through it, you know, but immediately found people to play in a band with. My first semester, I had a band and we were out playing. So I'm out in it in the city already, immediately, which is really funny to think about at that age, that I still the same thought process, find some guys, get a band. It's exactly what I did. And I'd see guys in the practice rooms practicing for hours on end, and they were amazing. And I'm thinking, well, I'm never going to catch that guy. He's amazing. Like, I don't care anyway. I'm just going to play with my band. That's what I want to do. So that's constantly happening. Still trying to get through school. It was an intense school, and I was in way over my head, but I got through it somehow.
It must have, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it must have felt so foreign almost, because I would imagine it's so structured, right? And you're one who just wants to go play, and now it's like, take this class, do it this way, you know, work on this part first. Like,
yes, it was very. I mean, and Berklee's different in a sense where it's structured, but it's structured for a type of music has structure, but is all improvisation on top of it. Mm-hmm. So you have all these things working against each other. They would teach you this thing and then say, well, forget that. Now just do the thing. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. So that's doubly hard. Not just take the test and try to get through, but now actually try to apply it in a real way. I mean, you know, it was crazy. But it was cool. I mean, I did learn a lot and just got through a lot, and didn't learn a lot because I just got through it. Sometimes you spend your time in school just getting through it and not even absorbing it. You're just trying to get from the beginning of it to the end of it and then forget it and move on. So, and I was playing at night in bands and running around and crazy.
Most of your practice still just doing it with the band at that point and playing the gigs?
Yep. Absolutely. Even though I'm supposed to be doing it for school, I have requirements that I have to do, proficiencies and ensembles, and there's no way to cheat around it. I mean, you just got to somehow. So I'd squeeze through it. And the only thing that served me is because I did have, for that age, I did play with people a lot as a kid. I found a way to make it work, make the assignment work, or squeeze through it, or make it sound like something, even if it was way over my head. So, you know, yeah.
Were those miserable for you?
Miserable, yeah. It was tough, you know, when you're a kid too. So all you want to do is want to get to it. You know, you just want to get to what you want to do. You don't want to, you know, deal with it. But, you know, grades, they were grades. They were midterms. There were finals. There was projects. There was stuff to do. You just had to do it. I was going to fail out, you know. Though I went 3.5 years of that and quit in my last semester because my band really started to like, okay, now I found the guys. I'm out. I can't do this anymore. You know, which my father was not very happy about.
Yeah, you're almost there.
One semester. He's like, I asked you to do one thing. You do one thing. And you couldn't do it. I'm like, yeah, I can't do it. I'm out. So I left and did my band and developed that band in Boston scene. It was amazing at that time and playing out, really making it happen. And 3 years later, as my band is working on deals and it's starting to happen, I actually went back. And I had such little requirements to finish. I tightened up a couple things that I left behind, and I took a couple of classes, you know, like art history too, and some other just silly, not silly, but just requirement stuff. And they gave me my degree. And they're like, just get out of here. Here, get out, you know. So anyway, so I tightened it up, you know, and moved on with my band and, you know, kept going. So.
And I have one question before we move on past the Berklee period. Did you find others who, like any kindred spirits, those who, like you, felt that they were in over their heads?
Yeah. I think we all gravitated towards each other. So I think we were sort of some of the first generation to come through that school that were really primarily interested in rock music or what was happening now. And that school wasn't really geared to that. Yeah. They were just starting to change the curriculum about halfway through while I was there to try to, you know, update themselves a little bit more to what was going on and to attract, you know, younger people and different aspects. And now Berklee's gigantic and it's has all aspects of the music business and giant buildings, and you know, it's really grown exponentially. But yeah, definitely I found a lot of friends like that, and one of which was my roommate at the time, who I started a band with and who I'm still best friends with today, you know, 100 years later. So
what prompted the decision to go back when you did?
I think a lot of things, just feeling bad that I just didn't finish. I mean, it's just, come on. And my dad was right. I mean, you know, I was very fortunate to be able to do that and to not at least just finish it, and just for whatever, just for the sake of finishing. And also too, I think I realized with my band, and as we were doing well on the scene and trying to get record deals and stuff, it just doesn't move as fast as you want it to. I'm like, well, I'm not going anywhere. Well, I'm not leaving the planet. I was living in Boston in the same neighborhood as the school right there in Back Bay. I'm like, yeah, certainly I can take a couple classes and finish it up. I think I can manage it. It was the right time to stop though, because I was so burnt out. I mean, it was just not going well at that point. And so before it gets really bad, let me just stop for a second. Anyway, yeah.
And so your band is getting some traction. To take us from there.
Yeah, so the Boston scene at that time was huge for original music. So we had an original band that all the big radio stations would play local music. So we had a lot of, it was a hard rock band, so we had a lot of traction. We were doing really well. Bands were getting signed out of Boston all over the place. Of course, the big bands at the time, the Cars and Aerosmith and all these bands, and the scene was just huge. So we were very fortunate to be there at that time. And, you know, we were working on development deals. We had development deals with big labels. We were playing New York City all the time. So we had some deals. We landed a publishing deal, a couple of record deals. Well, 1.5, you know, that we were working on. And then the scene, the fast forward is the scene in that early 90s completely changed. The rock scene overnight, the switch went off and it changed. I don't think it certainly hasn't been like that since. And everybody lost their record deals. Everybody was out of business from the top all the way to the bottom as far as the style. And, hard rock had almost virtually stopped. Nirvana, the Nirvana factor, right? At that time, changed the world. So yeah, we were done. So we're getting closer and closer and closer. We were right inside the door, and time just ran out. And we were all pretty young. To be spit out of the music business at that young age was kind of brutal. I'm like, really? Am I done at 25 years old? Wow, that was quick. So yeah.
So how did you adapt? What did you do next?
Not well. I played a lot of tennis.
So that's okay. That's when the tennis came in.
Yeah, I loved tennis as a kid. I loved it from the park. We were little kids in the town. Not that it wasn't country club tennis. In my hometown, they would have like a summer program. If you brought a can of tennis balls to the court, college kids, they'd have these town lessons, and so I just loved it. So of course my mom was like, "Here's a can of tennis balls. Get out of the house. Go to the park." So I always played tennis. I loved it, and so I played a lot of tennis. I think I took a year and just played tennis. I checked out pretty well, figuring out what am I going to do now. I became a tennis bum for a year.
No music at that time? Like, we're doing nothing with drumming?
A little bit here and there. I still had all my stuff. I still had a big rehearsal space that you had to take care of in Boston, and my friends, and do stuff here and there, but I was sort of in that one band for 5 years, just constantly grinding, trying to make it all happen. And then it just got turned off. So I just sort of stopped for a little while with an organized band and played with some friends here and there. And before I could figure out what else to do, started, and then again, started to back up again with some different bands through the sort of couple years after that. But the scene had completely changed so much in Boston. There was really nowhere to go, nothing to do at that point. So, yeah.
So what happens next?
Oh yeah, I'll leave you off right there. Well, because of that too, not just me, but a lot of my friends who were also doing the thing, who had successful Boston bands and had made records and stuff. One of them, my friend Angelo, had moved to Nashville as a songwriter. He, just to primarily be a songwriter because the scene in Boston died. So I went and visited him one winter for like a weekend, just for something to do. I'm like, I'll go to Nashville and visit Angelo, see what. And never in a million years did I think I would ever go to Nashville. It was just somewhere to visit my friend. And I went, wow, this place is pretty cool. Now, in my defense, and again, being naive, he was kind of happening at the time. He had been there for a while. So he was doing well songwriting, playing with a lot of great people. So I got to like walk in his shoes while visiting him. So that gave me a false sense of security. Whoa, this place is great. Everything's right here. I can just come here and do this. So that's when I realized, oh yeah, Nashville's the place to go. That's the place to go. So 2 years later, I got it all together, and came here. I came here, with my wife, who was not my wife at the time. We left Boston, not happy about it. Nashville at the time is not Nashville now. It's not that long ago, but it's long ago in development and time and what was going on. So I moved to Nashville and just decided I'm going to try to be a drummer. I've never done that before, where I'm just going to be a drummer for hire and play for different people. I was always the guy in a band. Very different concept for me. And the people here that do that are the best in the world. So being a little naive was okay, I guess, because I didn't really know the forces against me at the time, But everybody in Nashville was very supportive. So that's where it's different. Where even the best players and top session guys were always welcoming and nice and cool and weren't threatened by me. That's for sure. They're just like, oh great, yeah, cool, whatever.
So was it another experience like you had when you got to Berklee, or was it different?
It's amazing amazingly the same exact experience. I'm like, oh, I've moved to a place where everybody is better than me. And it's, again, it's not me trying to be like humble or self-deprecating. It's like, no, that's the truth. I mean, you're either going to face reality or not. If you don't see that, you're a lunatic, you know. And the best in the world are here. It didn't occur to me. And so like, well, at least I have experience with that. So here I am again. I'll just go do my thing. I'll find my way. All I can do is do my thing. I'll find my people, you know. Those guys can't play for everybody. I'll just find my people. And I moved here with a friend, my friend Jamie Rubin, who I played with in Boston. We had a band, and we came to Nashville kind of together. He opened the Family Wash over in East Nashville, which was there forever. Great club, modeled after some of the cool little Boston clubs that we grew up in and played in. So we moved here together, and and just started grinding it out. And it was a good time by accident, because back then Nashville wasn't now. People moved here, but it wasn't completely overrun. The scene was way tighter. I was very fortunate to meet a lot of great people really easily. And I think I got my first gig. I moved to Nashville within a month. I was playing with people and, you know, figuring it out. So I don't know.
What was it like transitioning from the music genre that you loved to like this new one?
It was difficult. The cool thing about some of it, well, I was lucky in one sense, and another sense not so lucky. I needed some parts of my playing. We're playing for songwriters, quieter situations, a little, you know, different vibe than just big rock, you know. So I got a lot of those gigs, and I'm like, well, I'm just gonna get in there. I mean, I know it's just drumming, but it's real different, you know. Some people would ask me, hey, can you just show up with a snare drum and a shaker? Can you just bring a kick drum and a snare and just brushes and it's very quiet? You know, all these different kind of situations, different style wise. So it really filled in a gap for me in a practical way, not just in a student way, that I needed. On the other hand, all the new era of country guys at that point, the Rodney Atkins, the Jason Aldeans, all these guys are at the same time coming up. They're unknown. That sensibility, they all wanted rock guys, really. I mean, they were country guys, but their bands, they wanted, you know, it was changing a lot.
Sure.
So I just luckily blindly walked into it, where a lot of those guys wanted a higher energy, bigger thing. Garth Brooks kind of did that too. You know, he started that sort of next generation of big time, big show, big everything, you know. And then sort of the guys that came after him were all his fans, like Rodney, you know, loved Garth or whatever. So they're trying to take it from there. Still being country, which I was fine with. But they wanted more of that sensibility. So lucky. A lucky break, you know.
And are these studio gigs, or are they live, or are they both?
Say that again?
Are you playing for others in the studio at this point, or are these live shows?
I did a lot of that. The studio thing, not the sort of big time A studio thing, because those guys are the guys and some of them are still the guys. But at that time, there was still a lot of song demo stuff going on, which was a whole industry within, you know, levels of industry. So I did a lot of that, where songwriters are just demoing their songs so that publishers can sell them, right? So they need to get a band together to quickly cut their song just so they can show it around, you know. So I did a lot of that. It was a great experience, you know. It even paid too, which I was like, wow, cool, that's cool, you know. I mean, the fact that people paid me to play drums is a joke, right? So you know, I was like, yeah, this is great. And it got some practical experience, which was pretty cool. And I got to do a lot of cool different stuff, a lot of independent stuff, and just all the people I found. And my friend who opened the Family Wash, that was a whole scene over there of all kinds of mix of people playing for real diverse artists all the time, which was great for me. My first 5 or 6 years in Nashville was perfect.
So what happens at this point? Have you met, are you working full time with Rodney at this point?
No, No, so I met him through a friend. I was playing with my friend Mark, who we played together with this folk singer woman who played all these colleges. Anyway, he knew Rodney just randomly and said, "Hey, this guy's has a gig this week and he's a new guy. He needs a band. Just come down, just play drums." I'm like, okay. So Tuesday we did a rehearsal, then we went out that weekend and did a couple shows, which is pretty typical of Nashville at that time. I was doing that a lot with people. Some people I'd play with again, some people I'd play with once that I'd never see again. And, it was just round and around. I'd done that with Rodney. Played a couple shows. The noontime slot on a festival where there's nobody there. People are setting up their chairs. He had made his sort of first record that hadn't quite come out yet. They were releasing singles and it wasn't really happening yet. It wasn't catching on. So I did that. He'd get sporadic gigs. So every time he get a gig, he'd call me back. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll do that. He's a nice guy. What do I know about country? I don't know anything about country. He's a nice guy though. So that's cool. I'll do that. And I just kept doing it. And then finally about 6 months in, he got a top 5 hit, kind of out of nowhere a little bit. It was a ballad. And I was like, all right, I got this thing figured out. This guy's got me playing with. I just found this guy. He's got a top 5 hit. We're on TV. This is amazing. And then nothing. Nothing happened for like 4 years.
You have these elements of your story where it's like, it's coming, it's happening, and then
that's truly the music business in a nutshell,
sure,
right? But
yeah.
It's riding all the different waves of it. Yeah, so nothing happened. He would still do gigs and still be out there, but I mean, and I was playing for other artists and auditioning and getting gigs and not getting gigs, and still moving along pretty well in Nashville, like still doing stuff. Yeah. And then I had auditioned and got a gig for another country artist. So 4 years after that, nothing was really happening at that point. I auditioned for another country artist, got the gig. We were doing the gig. It was a good gig. That guy had I think a top 10 hit at the time. I hated it. It was horrible. He paid me well. He wasn't a bad person, but it was just off the rails. Like, enough said. It was just not great.
I won't make you talk more about that, but what maybe does that tell you about what you were searching for and found in Rodney or that really you liked?
Yeah, well, I mean, just people that, weren't insane. That'd be great. Or just kind of off the rails or doing it for the wrong reasons or, the whole party thing, which is totally fine, but it's like, that's fine. I came from rock and roll. We all had fun or whatever, but it never got like first things first. So like, hey, I don't want it to like ruin what we're doing. Like first things first, like I don't, so it was just completely out of control, which was a great lessons in that, because I was thinking, well, if this is the way it's going to be, I had friends that worked at a hotel. They got me a hotel gig. I'll just go work at the hotel because I'm not going to be miserable playing drums. This is stupid. Like, I'll just go to the hotel and work. They're cool there. And, if I'm going to have a job I don't want, I might as well do it, there. So anyway, so at that point, I'm miserable doing that gig. Rodney throws out a single. They just let it song, If You're Going Through Hell. They just kind of tossed it. Yeah. They just tossed it against the wall. Didn't give it much thought. I'm like, oh man, come on, man. you got to get this thing going. I can't play with this guy anymore. Well, the guy I was playing with ends up clearing house, firing like the whole band. Fine. You're firing me? Okay, cool. I fire you. Some people, anyway, yeah. So in that time, Rodney started getting some gigs. They were trying to promote this new single. It was basically him and I. There was no band. So we were literally going out, him and I and another acoustic guitar player in a car, like promoting this single. So we went from sitting at my kitchen table with nothing like that December. They released it in January to like having a number one single out of nowhere by July. Completely other side of the universe. And, you know, I mean, we worked it. We were out there working it when nobody cared, you know. I was just happy to be doing that with him. I was like, well, that was terrible. At least we're doing this and we're giving it a shot, you know. And, you know, from that point on, he went from nothing to that single to 4 consecutive number ones in a row.
Mm-hmm.
It makes no sense. I mean, it makes sense. He works hard and people work hard. But, I mean, if you had told me that December before, I'm like, I would have said, yeah, you're cool. You're insane. But, so that's the, hope I'm not talking too long to tell the story, but,
No.
Oh, this is perfect.
It's nuts, but, and we've been working ever since. That was 2000. I met him in 2002, 2003 when he got that first little hit. And then in 2006, I guess in January 2006, they put out Going Through Hell just as a single.
Mm-hmm.
And then that July, it went to number one. And then, you know, around and around, and we're still going. So somehow we're still here. And still, it's you know, I always joked with Rodney that, man, if you could just get one number one, everything would be, you know, different. And then after, you know, 6, 7 number ones, I'm like, yeah, if we could just get one more number one, everything would be, you know, it's just constantly, they're just still trying to make it happen, right? Still trying to go. So
did your performance change the way that you practice during this period of success? Did anything change as far as how you went about preparation? Did it make it easier? Did it make it harder?
Well, it's the survival mode again, because, you know, all the stuff you have to do for the 30 minutes you get to play, or the half an hour you get to play, is, you know, so it was always just practicing to, you know, to be able to adapt to how it changes. So for me, it was just trying to stay open to the change of it. So at one point, you know, we're in a car promoting his record. So I have a little mini stand-up kit that I have a little mini bass drum and a little snare with brushes that would work, and we'd play anywhere. Or sometimes we'd go into a radio station, I'd just play a garbage can, you know, just because, you know, just constantly adapting to whatever it was. Then, you know, we got on our first big arena tour, but we're only playing 20 minutes. So you got to get on and off in 20 minutes. And the first night we play with Martina McBride, they said, yeah, guys, that was great. Listen, you went 23 minutes. Can you cut a song? So we were playing 4 songs, I think, at that point. Get off, you know. So you're just constantly adapting to the changing world of it. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I was practicing, but we were so busy doing it that you have less time to actually sit down and play. If you wanted to practice, and more time to, you know, you're just running around trying to keep up with the thing and go from place to place. So,
do you remember having like a positive lens on that experience at that time, or a different one?
It was very positive for me, because having tried to get on that ride before, or whatever I thought that ride was in my head, with my band, and never sort of getting what I would think getting my foot in the door. So getting to take this ride that much later with a guy in a way that I could have never expected. You know, we're literally going from sitting in my kitchen to playing like the Tonight Show. It's crazy. So, I mean, I was fully aware of like, hey, this is crazy. This doesn't happen very often or at all. And just to be on the inside of it, just as a drummer, and is great. It's just fun and exciting, and but it's really hard. But that didn't seem hard to me. I was like, oh no, I want to put the gas all the way down. Let's just keep going, you know, which is, you know, not great either, but you know, I'm glad it happened to me later, having that experience, and maybe younger, because if I had that experience younger, you know, you just would go crazy in a sense. I would just want to keep pushing and pushing. So I got to at least enjoy it a little bit more through someone else's name. So I was just the drummer, which was kind of cool to be.
Can I ask a follow-up about that? I've often wondered with you'll see these band members and the band will finally get some success, and then one of the members might quit at like 23 or 4. Do you ever make mental notes of that? Because I've often wondered like what else they think is going to happen. Like I can understand if they might be so miserable that they have to leave, but it just seems odd to me that they leave once the success comes.
I know. Well, it's hard to deal with, I suppose. You don't know till you get there, I suppose. I got to watch it a little bit more from an arm's length because it wasn't my name on it, so all the burden wasn't on me. I can't imagine that at 24 years old having that happen. I think of my band, and I love those guys, and we're still all friends. I'm thinking, oof, somebody would have been dead. Somebody would have been in jail. I would have been trying to control the whole thing or so, you know what I mean? So you think as a kid, it's probably okay. That, someone just hands you a giant check or something, or, it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea all around. So yeah, people just can't handle it and they spin out of control and it's very difficult. So it's hard to maintain just your energy, just doing it as a side guy in that environment. It's a lot. It's a lot of running around, so.
This is going to sound like a very random question, but any tennis still in the story here at any point?
Any tennis skill?
No, were you playing any tennis still?
Oh yeah, always. And okay. I had taught tennis in Boston too. This inner city club, kind of a famous club, because my friends were these real tennis players, and they recruited me to take the beginner kids in this camp. So I done that in Boston, and then I still do it here in Nashville. I was doing it right until they closed the Atkins school in my neighborhood, after school tennis program for kids. It's fun. And again, it's just like I learned, it's not country club style. It's real deal, like kids, public school. It's great. Yeah, always with the tennis. I love it. Sometimes with road partners or other musicians, I'd find a guy that played and we'd bring our rackets and we'd go find a court and do that. Yeah, always obsessed with it. I love it so much. Just such a wannabe, typical musician, such a wannabe.
Do you see any parallels between what you've done to improve tennis performance to what you've done to improve your drumming performance?
Yeah, well, you definitely, like anything, I think drumming especially, or maybe it's just my perspective, is, tennis, because it's such a singular sport, you can't be inside your own head all the time. You see tennis players, if you ever watch tennis, you watch the guy spin out and yelling at himself. Or
I've worked with some tennis players, yes.
Yeah.
It's a common feature of the sport.
They're either trying to talk themselves in or out of something, or they've just completely lost their mind, and because it's so singular. So it's been a good practice to not. My friend Trey, who's a great drummer, plays for Brooks and Dunn and Reba. He's a great guy, and we talk about it all the time of trying to not be in your own head. As soon as I'm in my own head, I'm at my worst. Even if it's something simple, especially recording, because playback, it'll hear it. It's like the camera, it'll hear you hesitating or act. So tennis, very much so, you can't be in your own head. You have to just let it go and move on and not be thinking about everything, which goes for just about anything, but especially a game like that. And I think especially drumming. I mean, you cannot be thinking foot, hand, time, counting. Listen, that would, you don't want to hear me do that. That's terrible. It's terrible. Nor do you want to see me hit a tennis ball like that either. It would be terrible. You just want to flow and go and not think about it too much. So
do you ever, with drumming, do you ever find yourself in a challenging headspace?
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah. Again, my buddy Trey, who helps me sometimes, we record when we could see people, he'd come over and sort of produce me, where he would sort of run my Pro Tools rig and help me out and let me just play a little bit. And he would say, try this, just this sounds better. He's a great drummer. Just try this little thing. And he used to say, what are you doing? Like, stop thinking about it. You just did it. Stop. So yeah, it happens all the time. And you really have to get out of that. It's hard sometimes. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't get out of it. And you just get a little stuck and you got to walk away, or you got to just push your way through it a little bit and hope nobody notices,
The untrained ear that isn't going to notice that.
Maybe that's why some of those Nashville session guys are so amazing. Not only are they great musicians, of course, but that's not half the story. It's the ability to do that day in and day out and function like that. And and still have to come up with it in 3 hours, a finished version, it's very difficult to do, I think. But,
So were there any defining moments that you can identify on your drumming path?
It's hard to think that way. I mean, a big one for me was moving to Nashville, because it was one of the first times I said to myself, oh, are you still going to play? It was a point where I really remember saying to myself, well, are you going to play or not play anymore? I mean, the Boston thing is kind of done. The band thing up here is not really happening. It's okay. I can still noodle around, but I really had to make a conscious decision of like, okay, am I giving up now? Or am I going to go do something to try to, keep going? So yeah, that's probably the biggest one where I really had a moment of time saying, well, what are you going to do? You got to make it. You can't just do nothing. It's fun to play tennis for a year, but
kind of the fork in the road moment.
Yeah, it really is, and it's very cliche, but it was really one. It was a very much that, like, you got to make a call here. I can't live in the park in the tennis court. I can't sleep on the bench. Sounds fun, but Boston's cold in the winter, so it's not going to work. Yeah.
What made you take this step down the path of let's do this, keep going?
I guess I just didn't feel like I was done. I don't know why I got that sense. I just felt like, and I also felt, well, what else am I going to do? Is there anything else if it was something else maybe I was interested in, or a career that seemed to make sense besides that was just a day job, I might have done it, but I really had no answer. Like, well, it's the only thing I halfway know how to do at this point. I've come this far. What other skill do I have? They're not going to hire me at the Home Depot. A 16-year-old kid's more qualified. So what am I going to do? So yeah, I said, well, let's go for it. And at that time, moving from Boston to Nashville was so much cheaper, just a practical sense. I mean, I had nothing to lose. I'm cutting everything in half, just going to try it. I'm like, well, I've got nothing to lose at this point. I could always come back, No one's going to miss me that much. I can come back in a year. So
what do you find easy and what do you find challenging about what you do now?
It's always the mental game, right? It's always trying to keep your head in it, trying to ride the waves of the business of it, or your own, how you feel about your playing that day. Like anything in a job, like you also too, when you turn something you love into your job, you're like, oh, you do what you love. I'm like, yes, absolutely. But when you turn what you love into your job, it poses, it can be a problem sometimes, because you have emotion wrapped up in that, and it can be dicey. So yeah, I think just keeping my head in it, still trying to push forward, always try to adapt even though you don't want to. I think I'm pretty good at that. I think I'm still here. It doesn't bother me to adapt. I don't want to be the old guy mentality, whether I'm 20, 40 or 50. I want to be just not staying in it, and not being turned upside down by something. So anyway.
You mentioned kind of burnout relative to the story about leaving Berklee. And it's interesting, there's people assume that burnout only happens in situations like that. You're having a, head down grind, something that you don't really want to do. There's also burnout that happens as a result of, like you said, doing the thing that you love and it being a job. Have you experienced that as well along your path?
I'm a little sick in the head where I want to keep going, so I'm a little weird that way. Not that I'm such a hard worker. I just think once I'm in it, I want to go. I'll do 20 shows in a row. Let's go. So that's its own form of burnout where I'm not realizing, you should just take a minute and unwind. But having chased it for so long and then getting the opportunity, I'm not going to let my foot off the gas, so, that's a thing too. I think it's more of the challenge of burnout of especially in a town like Nashville, which is an industry town, always being in the mix, where it's constantly all that. I've been lucky to have a steady gig for a long time, so that's pretty cool. But still, you just being in that all the time and worried about it or thinking about it can burn you out more than the actual doing of it.
Yeah, and country music obviously has such a strong history, but as you mentioned, it continues to evolve, right?
Yeah.
So I would imagine kind of keeping up with that is the ever presenting challenge.
It is. I went from trying to break into it to finding some people to, now he's the huge new guy, to now you're not the new guy anymore. You can only be the new guy once, right? So I don't care who it is, just once. Whether you're Luke Combs right now, he's the new guy right now. 2 years, he's not the new guy. He may be just as successful, but so you constantly have to ride that out, and adapt and figure it out. I was the new guy in Nashville. I still think I'm the new guy in Nashville because when I moved here, these guys had been here, established guys. I'm like, so a friend of mine, Trey especially, turned to me like, you've been here 20 years. This just in, you're not the new guy anymore. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. It feels like 2 weeks sometimes, but yeah. So yeah, that's the burnout and just keeping your head in it can wear you out sometimes. But and as my family never gives me a break. Like, oh, poor you. Oh, did you play drums for an hour? Oh my gosh, that must be so hard for you in front of people. So, you got to keep it in perspective too, right? Oh, and then somebody paid you to do that? Oh my God. How can you stand it? Yeah. So anyway.
So what have you learned about yourself throughout this journey?
That I'm obviously a lunatic. And I don't know what my parents were thinking. What have I learned? Well, it's funny. I think I learned that I always say it as a joke, but it's kind of true. I guess I have a higher threshold for pain than I thought I did. I didn't think I did. I don't mean like, you're a tough guy. I don't mean that. I just mean, you can absorb more hits than you thought you could. Look at where we all are right now, right? I mean,
it's the name of the
what?
Game, right?
3 weeks ago, we're going to Canada. I mean, we're all experiencing this upside down. There's just no end to it, right? And I think, it's beyond the music business, obviously, but it's a whole new challenge in a sense. We were just talking today. I'm in the business of trying to cram as many people into a building as possible. That's our business, basically, our live business.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a problem right now. It's going to be a minute before people want to get in a building with a lot of people.
What has that been like?
I think it's still shock, really, because I said we've been on the books the whole time. We had shows starting in January, and we've been working. We were in California, I guess 2 weeks before it really got. We happened to be off the week Nashville got shut down. We just happened to be off. It was like sort of spring break, and we just happened to not be traveling that week. But we were traveling the weekend before. We did 2 shows out in California, so we flew out there. It was already a little dicey, and I was wiping down everything in my plane. And and looking at people sitting next to me, giving them the stink eye, not their fault, going, don't breathe on me. And that was, don't even look at me. And that was weeks ago, right? So it's changed so dramatically since then. But yeah, so it's rough. I mean, and it's top to bottom, right? Just like everything in every industry, but music business, it doesn't matter if you're whomever the top person is, all the way down to the newest of the new, it's game over. So, we'll figure it out, I guess. I just adapt and keep going. I don't know. It's hard to process. Like my buddy Trey, again, who lives in South Bend now, he lived in Nashville forever. He stays at my house when he's rehearsing with Reba and Brooks and Dunn, and they were rehearsing all that week with Reba. Mm-hmm. All this was happening because they do the Vegas residency, Reba and Brooks and Dunn, that started the first week of April with the ACM Awards. Obviously, none of us did any of that. So they did a week of rehearsal, and then they got shut down, and it all went away. So we're all sort of figuring it out. Nothing to figure out. We're just staying home. I'm staying home.
I was going to say on pause, as they talk about here in New York City. We are on pause.
Yeah. Oh, you're in New York. I didn't even realize you're in New York. Yeah. All my family still lives in Southern Connecticut, so it's crazy up there.
It sure is. People keep asking me, "Is it really as bad?" I'm like, "Yes, it is."
My mom is still a full-time nurse in Southern Connecticut. She's working in a clinic, so it's not the hospital. But I'm just going, "Oh my God, Mom, you're killing me."
Yeah, that's certainly got to be nerve-wracking.
It's nerve-wracking. So, but for everybody, but all I can do is stay in my attic, right?
What do your parents think about this, given that they have seen this obviously from the beginning when you got your first little drum set?
I think, it's interesting. I'd love to ask them that more in that direct way. It's something I've always done, so I guess they just never thought of it any other way. But they were certainly happy that I found my way to still continue to do it and as a job and have a life. There's certainly easier ways to get a job. Certainly easier ways to make money, I guess. I'm not an idiot. I could have got a job, I guess. I think they were happy that I made it through and that I'm doing what I wanted and that it worked out. Again, I don't think they were ever talking me out of it. I think that probably would have been impossible and just been trouble. So I think they're happy that I'm safe and that I have a place to live and I have a big family in Southern Connecticut, and they all come out, whether I was playing in my high school band or we were playing Mohegan Sun Arena. They're all coming, and they still do it. So awesome. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty fun.
So what advice would you give an aspiring drummer or any musician?
What advice? That's so difficult. I'm probably not the greatest person to give that. You definitely have to find your own path. I know that sounds so generic and cliche, but what I mean by that is you have to. My story is my story, and there's everybody's story in this town. Everybody's got a different story on how they got even to the same place. Let's say, I could have 5 guys that I'm playing with in Rodney's band. Everybody's story is completely different. So you really have to find your own way to get there, that works for you, that makes sense for you, and not try to be, you can emulate people, and I want to try to be the best drummer in Nashville. I don't really know what that means, and you're not going to be, by the way. It's an impossible task, so you really have to find your way and find your people and what makes sense for you, and you'd be better off, it's hard to do, but that's the trick. And probably for anything, but certainly for playing an instrument and finding your people and even what you're good at within that.
So can't be the best, but do you consider yourself one of the best?
No, I never thought of it that way. I always wanted to be the best for the person I'm playing for,
Mm.
that they're happy, that they trust me, or that it, whatever they're trying to do, or that's what I want to be the best at. That's the truth, because I already know that whether I think I'm the best, which is not even close to people in town. There's so many supremely talented people in this town. And even they would probably say the same thing, that, no, I'm not the best. It's that guy, And so you really just want to be, making the people you're working with happy. And again, probably like just about any job, you want to, make sure you're doing it well, but also that people are, that they're happy with it and that it works, so that's kind of where I'm at. That's what you got to find. And it's different for everybody. It really is. People definitely don't want to hear my story, and say, because you're not going to want to do what I did, maybe. So you got to find your own way. I always tell people I had a day job in between Rodney putting out Going Through Hell. So I was still working that day job in that spring at a hotel downtown, the Renaissance Hotel. Great people there. So they had all video screens around the lobby playing country music. Well, we made the video for Going Through Hell. I'm in the video. That video is debuting. It's top 10 video. It's debuting on CMT, or it's being played on CMT. No, it was debuting. And because we had just made it. And the people I work with, because I'm working at the front desk, are freaking out. Hey, I'm like, yeah, I know. And I'm checking people in. That's the music business. Yeah, that's me in the video, by the way. And I'm checking in next. So that about sums it up right there. You got to figure it out. If I didn't do that, it wouldn't have afforded me to maybe play for Rodney when he didn't have a lot of gigs and stick with him. I would have had to jump other places, or taking a gig I didn't want just for $50 that was going nowhere. So people don't love that story in a sense where, I don't want to do that. I'm like, well.
So it sounds like there's a lot of behind the scenes things that people aren't aware of.
Yeah. I'm in a tie with a name tag while I'm in a top 10 video that's debuting at CMT in the same lobby. Yeah, that's the real music business right there. It's fun though. It's fun.
What's at this point in your career, what's like do you have like a favorite part? Like, is it the performing now that really is your favorite part? Is it still the collaboration piece?
Well, I love playing live. I always have. It's just fun. It's an energy. It's fun. Drums are loud. They're fun. I love that part of it. I like traveling too. I like running around playing different places. It's great. But since, we've been on the lockdown here, quarantine, and I have my little recording studio attic, friends have been sending a lot of stuff, all these great people, and we've been working, collaborating, doing all this great stuff. I started what we've been meaning to start for a year and a half, a podcast with my buddy Trey, drummer. It's nonsense. But just doing all that kind of creative stuff and really making good stuff. And I still love that, and now that we're all just doing it for nothing, it's even better. So it's quality, collaboration with people you love doing it with. So kind of cool.
I had several years ago, I had a master's student who did his master's thesis on flow experiences during onstage performances of musicians. Have you ever had that like flow type experience on stage where you're just like immersed in what you're doing?
Absolutely. I try to be there all the time. Some days more than others, but mostly I get there. Like and there's, my rig has got, Live's got some things going on. I got laptops over here running. I got, there's stuff going on. There's function where I have to functionally count people in or cue, so there's the job part of it, but no, I get there. Everything sort of goes out of my head, and I usually get there, which, the last thing you want to be doing is thinking about something else, or daydreaming, or fussing about something, you're definitely going to make a mistake, you know. So yeah, it'd be fascinating to see what that, you know, thesis would be like, or what people would have to say about that. But I don't know if I tap into it, or if I just do it naturally, like all the air goes out of my head naturally. But
that's one of the kind of elusive things about it, is people describe it like it's something that just happens, right? It's kind of like the ultimate marrying of the internal state and the world, the situation you're in. So trying to chase that, or trying to figure out how to trigger that, is the inevitable challenge.
Yeah. And it doesn't happen all the time, because sometimes you're just playing something and you're just functioning and you're going, okay, the next song, what's the song? Okay, reading the chart, maybe a little, or something a little bit more functional, because you don't really have the time to get in it. But with my main gig, and it's really all about, and Rodney's always been all about making it about people, you know, making it about them, bringing them in, having a good time, no matter where it is, not just, you know, making it about himself, in a sense where, you know, if people aren't singing back to you and aren't in it, what are we doing? This is so, you're really trying to get that, whether it's, you know, 10 people or a giant festival or whatever you're trying to do. So luckily he's had some songs that people do that with. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit, have you ever felt like you were faking it, or that you were a fraud?
Oh yeah, all the time, right? Sure. I mean, if you're not like a musician or something creative and you don't feel that, you know, I'd say you're a little cuckoo. But and I say that jokingly, but not a fraud. You just wish you know, oh, I should be better at this, or oh, I feel like I'm not really connecting to it, or you know, I sucked. That was terrible. I just didn't get it done, you know? So it's not like you're a fraud in a sense where, you know, you just feel like, oh, that's just not good enough, or, which, you know, what does that all mean really? You know, it depends, but it's not really, it's not a contest at all. No matter how much people make it a contest, it's really not.
And so I'm not sure if you're aware, but a lot of our research has been on expert performance, or expertise. And it's part of that is the classic nature versus nurture. So an extreme view of nature would be the environment has nothing to do with it, practice has nothing to do with it. An extreme view of nurture would be that what you're born with has nothing to do with it. It's all what happens as far as practice and that type of thing. And of course, there's all that in the middle, that people can be anywhere on the scale. So we're curious what percentage you would apply to each.
Wow. It's hard to say about yourself, right? I guess, I guess there's a lot of nature in there where somehow this thing interested me to the point where I was just doing it as a little kid in some form. So something was in there, because, you know, all my other cousins got drumsticks, and he didn't know me any different from, you know, it wasn't any clue as far as that goes. So I guess there's a lot of that somewhere in there. There's a connection you make with it. That is the thing. Whether you have a talent for it, I don't know. So some people are obviously very special and have incredible talents, and then you can't just have it. There's a lot of people with those incredible gifts or ability that don't really do anything with it, or don't use it for anything good or useful. It's just kind of there. I know some people that were just great at it, and I'm like, well, okay. And they never really did anything with it, or played with the band, or made anything creative with it. So, or there was, you know, great natural tennis players had all this ability, and they couldn't win a match. But they were incredible. Their backhand, you know, was mind blowing. You know, so talent. But so I guess I had some nurture in a sense where, you know, people around me supporting it. You know, being in a band, learning, taking what I had a feel for, and then really sort of practically learning how to survive somehow in it. I don't know. But percentage wise, I don't know. 75-25, maybe 75 something, some defect that I was born with, and then 25, nurture, which I fought all the time, in school. Instead of taking it, I fought it, so.
Anything that we haven't asked that you feel is important for the listeners to know?
I think I've talked way too much, haven't I?
Not at all.
Was it 6 hours? How long were you going?
I could listen to you talk all day.
Oh no! Oh boy! Yeah.
Or play. I mean, we could do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you guys are covering it. I don't really. When you're doing it, you don't really have the perspective sometimes. And that's why I'm talking about it. I go, I don't know. Never really thought about it, that much in that way. I'm always trying to get point A to point B, and have people not be upset with me or something. So,
what is the biggest takeaway from your story?
What is the biggest takeaway? I guess that you just have to, oh boy, that sounds so corny. I don't know how to articulate it, but I mean, you really do have to keep going even when it sucks. Drumming especially is a weird thing where I always made this joke with Rodney, sometimes when we'd have new bands, when he was new, it was like new guys every weekend that were just doing it for the first time. So they would always just lay out. When in doubt, just kind of lay out. Whereas a drummer, you can never lay out. If you lay out, the whole thing is destroyed. People will immediately, you can't stop playing as a drummer. You just can't do it. It's over. A guitar player could stop and lay out, and it could still go, and then come back in or whatever. You really have to, keep going. You just can't stop, even if it sucks. I sound corny, right? Like where we are now, right? I know, Rodney Atkins, if you're going through hell, keep on going, right? I don't even know, what am I talking about?
No,
but it's so cliched, but I mean, you really just.
That song is going to make a resurgence with the whole situation.
I know. It's so true. Well, that's kind of song too, when it came out, where when you see it, people take it on. It could mean anything from the smallest thing to the most serious thing.
Sure.
It's that same mentality. And as a drummer, I have to get to the end of this song. Even if I train wreck it, I still got to get, and then end it. I got to end it, so it's the only choice, so like it or not, that's what it is. So, yeah.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been fascinating.
Yeah, no kidding. This was awesome.
That's one way to put it. Fascinating. I'm sorry. I talk so much. I guess I've been stuck in my attic too long.
That was great.
Well, then I'm glad we got you when we did, because that was awesome.
Okay, cool. Well, good. Good to talk to you guys. Good to see you. It's nice to actually talk to people. That's the weirdest part about this, right? For everybody, just staying inside and doing the thing. But I've done a bunch of these Zoom with friends, where we had a Zoom cocktail hour. It was great. So it's fun. All right, thank you guys. Be safe.
Thank you so much.
The Path Distilled is hosted by Kevin Harris and Lauren Tashman, created and produced by Kevin Harris. The content is copyrighted by The Path Distilled, all rights reserved.